Now we move on to the crime watch and trying to understand what is happening in the country, specifically with the case of Uncle Aboo Loonat, who had been kidnapped for almost a month and was released recently. And on this, we'll be joined by a crime expert, Mr. Chet Thomas. Mr. Chet Thomas, thank you for your time and welcome to Salam Media.
Venus, good morning to you, the listeners and the viewers.
Thank you very much. Now, if you can just take us through the case of Mr. Lunat in terms of when he was kidnapped and how the investigation has been going on so far.
So, first of all, the investigation that has been undertaken by various role players, driven primarily by the states as well as the stakeholders from organizations such as CCIN, Vision, and others, um, has at least given the results that have shown the family that there was hope. You must understand when a person of Uncle Abu's age is kidnapped at 82, it's not just the fact that it's an exceptionally traumatic situation, it's also the fact that the person is elderly, there may be health concerns, etc. And we've seen a lot of the kidnap for ransom cases drag on for months, in some cases even years. So the fact that this case was resolved so quickly is a blessing to the family, a blessing to Uncle Abu, and again, a wake-up call to the community who is being specifically targeted for kidnap and ransom cases. And we're seeing a rise in kidnap for ransom cases, specifically within the Muslim community as well as other communities. We've seen an increase in the Muslim community, of course, but also the Portuguese community, also other communities where there's copycat kidnappings taking place, where people have been taken for far less money than the more well publicized kidnappings. One thing about the community, they have come together. They have taken this threat exceptionally seriously. They've created relationships with security companies. Those security companies, in turn, together with representative intelligence bodies like the CCIN, have ensured that they've created joint task force together with the anti-kidnapping team from the National Crime Intelligence Office under the able command of Major General Khan and Colonel Dawood. And we've seen that this threat, although it persists and is increasing, is being met head on.
Now, in terms of looking back into obviously 2024, we saw, I like to just mention, an increase in the kidnappings of businessmen, whether it may be from the Muslim community or the Portuguese community. But through the investigations, has there been any link in all the kidnappings in terms of, is it one syndicate or is it like just different groups of people trying to get a quick buck from the kidnapped victims?
So, Eunice, you make some very valid points there in terms of the question that you asked. When kidnap for ransom became a major issue in South Africa, we saw that it was based on a syndicate that had operated primarily within the Maputo region and had targeted Muslim businessmen in Mozambique, and that kidnap for ransom was part of a syndicate that was based in Maputo that had been involved in the narcotics trade previously, had links back to Lahore in Pakistan, and even had links back to Afghanistan. We saw that that type of kidnapping was then exported to South Africa, and we saw it happening within the Muslim community in areas like Mahikeng, Polokwane, Mbombela. Then it moved into the more well-known areas of South Africa, which are more police, surprisingly. We saw an increase in Laudium, we saw an increase in Fordsburg, we saw an increase in Lenasia. What we're now experiencing is what we call copycat kidnappings. Because of these high-profile kidnappings that took place, and because of the large values of monies that were involved, a lot of opportunistic criminals saw this as an opportunity to branch out. Now, you must understand that there's a lot of logistics involved in a kidnap for ransom. You have to have stolen vehicles that you can abandon. You have to have safe houses that are prepared. You have to have intelligence on the person that you're taking in case they have specific dietary needs, if they have health issues that need to be attended to. You need to understand whether or not those people have access to funds, whether they're part of a business conglomerate that could perhaps help. And you also understand as a kidnapper that you're in it for the long term. Now your copycat kidnappers have come along. They don't have the funds, they don't have the logistics because it's an investment. When you commit a kidnap for ransom, it's an investment with a massive return on investment. But you need those funds for those soldiers, for those firearms, for those stolen firearms, for those
Mm,
safe houses, for the negotiations to take place, to be able to launder those funds. With the copycat kidnappings, we're seeing a rise of what we call express kidnappings. They don't have the safe houses. They don't have access to vehicles. They don't have the intelligence on the individuals. So they'll hold the people for a very short while and perhaps use their mobile device and that individual to be able to access bank accounts and empty those accounts. But the big money lies with the kidnap for ransom of businessmen. So what we see now is an increase with the copycats, and the copycats are becoming a lot more professional. They're finding the funding. So what you're seeing is a crossover where people are involved in CIT heists or ATM bombings or murder for hire. Those same soldiers are now being used in the kidnap for ransom. The people who supply the stolen cars that ram the cash in transit vehicles and then escape from that particular crime scene are now the same people supplying the vehicles to the kidnap for ransom syndicates. The people that supply the firearms and the explosives to the ATM bombers are now supplying firearms and soldiers to the very same syndicates that are involved with kidnap for ransom. So this organized crime has increased exponentially in South Africa. And that's why we need a very well capacitated crime intelligence that is able to disrupt and dismantle these syndicates. And the only way they can do that is to proactively infiltrate and have actionable intelligence on the ground. And therein lies a problem at the moment, because although we've seen from the National Office of Crime Intelligence a concerted effort to disrupt and dismantle these syndicates and to partner with the private security industry and organizations such as the CCIN, the unit itself doesn't have enough resources, doesn't have enough funds, doesn't have enough detectives to quell this ever growing threat.
mm. That's very devastating at the same time because now we, as the residents, obviously in terms of residents of Johannesburg or any other place, the safety is at stake right now, and we are worried in what is next in terms of who's the next victim. However, in terms of Mr. Abu's case, has there been any leads in terms of the perpetrators of the crime, or do we have any arrests that have been done so far?
The case is still active. There are people working on that case from the states as well as from the private sector community involving those role players I mentioned earlier. It would be unwise to speculate at this point in time and to give information about the stage that that investigation is at. But rest assured, when you've got a unit that's been run by a general and a colonel that have committed themselves together with the private security industry as well as organizations like the CCIN to fight the scourge, we are going to see positive results. The problem we have, of course, is capacity and resource issues. And this problem is only going to get worse before we can turn it around completely. And it's a holistic problem. It impacts the whole of the South African police services and, in fact, our whole criminal justice system. We just don't have enough detectives to investigate the cases. We don't have enough analysts to follow the money in terms of the money laundering that took place. And we also have a shortage of qualified prosecutors to be able to take on what can become a very complex case, especially in respect of the funds that are paid across, and to follow those funds so that you can grab the kingpins. We have seen a couple of low-level arrests in terms of other kidnappings that took place in 2024, but we're not seeing the kingpins, and we're not finding out truly who's behind it, because you must remember, these are intelligence-based operations that the criminals are committing. So although we talk about intelligence-based proactive policing, the criminals themselves are using intelligence to identify who the victims are going to be, who is moneyed enough and who is connected enough to be able to have family or friends or colleagues that will be able to raise that kind of money. So it means that there are people from within our communities themselves that are part and parcel of the scourge.
Now, earlier on, you also mentioned that when the investigations were done earlier, it was found that the syndicate was found to be based in central Maputo. Now, regarding what was happening this about a couple of weeks ago in Mozambique itself, we saw a big scourge of people coming into the South African side from Mozambique. Now, what does this mean in terms of the safety and obviously of the South African citizens? And moreover, is there any plan in terms of strengthening the security on the borders and also inland?
So we now have the Border Management Authority, the BMA, which are responsible for our ports of entry. And they seem to be making inroads. They're using technology, they're using drones, they're using a varied amount of different disciplines and technologies to be able to protect our borders. But it's not enough. And our police are in support of the BMA at the borders. Now, what's very notable is that our Minister of Police, Senzo Mchunu, sent out a letter on the 31st of December 2024, on New Year's Eve rather, to the National Commissioner. And he raised 3 points in that particular letter. The one point related to the political killings task team in KZN, the other related to appointments within crime intelligence. But one of the interesting points was that he wanted a report before the end of January from the National Commission of Police, what the intended strategy was going to be to safeguard our ports of entry, which means that our minister is taking this issue exceptionally seriously. And it's not just the issue of the escaped prisoners from Maputo that may be making their way to South Africa, because South Africa is far more lucrative for a criminal than Mozambique is. It's also the fact that our country's become a massive transshipment point for illicit narcotics. We're seeing explosives coming across our borders that are used in ATM bombings, CRT heists, and of course, illegal mining. We also have the issue of human trafficking taking place. So our borders are critical in terms of the safety and security of our citizenry, and the fact that this is one of the 3 points that was raised by our minister on the very last day of 2024, giving a timeline of which he wants a response from the National Commissioner, is very telling about how seriously the state is beginning to take this.
No, that's very interesting, and we really need to keep an eye on the news, obviously, as South African citizens, as to what is to happen and how we also, I believe that one of the things that we need to also put ourselves in is being aware of our surroundings and being prepared of anything that can happen. Because last year we saw also the gun laws where it was being put under stringent discussions, and we don't know how that's going to go, but we hope for the best and to see that safety actually has to be number one priority. Once again, Mr. Chad, thank you for your time, and it was really interesting and informative to discuss this matter, and we really hope that things will change for the better in the upcoming future.
Thank you, Eunice.
Right, that's Mr. Chet Thomas, the RS Forensic Investigations. And speaking about the current return of Mr. Aboo Loonat, who was kidnapped for over a month, an 82-year-old man kidnapped and came back home safely. However, also looking deeper into the discussion of what could be the causes of the kidnappings, especially as we've seen from later 2023, how the kidnapping cases actually soared up in South Africa. So let's take a break. After this, next up, we'll be having Mr. Simon Zwane as he gives us some road safety tips.